everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a massive financial milestone, and honestly, the data paints it in a completely different light than you might expect. I'm talking about a specific number that haunts a lot of us. But by the time we wrap up this analysis, I promise you're going to see both the math and the mindset behind it from a completely new perspective.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Imagine you walk into a pitch-black room. You flip the light switch, and literally nothing happens. You flip it again. Still dark. You try a third time, a fourth time, nothing. Now, most of us would just give up right there, right? We'd figure the bulb is dead or the wiring is completely shot, but what if the electricity was actually working the entire time? Like it's moving through this massive underground circuit, slowly building up the raw energy needed to travel thousands of miles just to reach that one single bulb. And then, on the 100th try, the light suddenly flickers on, and the whole room just floods with light. From that exact second onward, every time you touch that switch, it's instant. Well, building wealth works the exact same way. And the most exhausting, frustrating, and frankly invisible part of that whole journey is the race to your very first $10,000.
The invisible charge, the agonizing climb.
To really get a handle on this invisible charge, let's look at a proxy we're going to call a loan. So a loan is 24, works as standard 9 to 5, and is trying his absolute hardest to do everything perfectly by the book. Every single month, he's following the traditional personal finance advice to a T. But his day-to-day reality? It's a brutal grind of just grueling sacrifices. I mean, he's skipping those overpriced morning lattes and surviving on, sad lukewarm instant coffee. He's cooking every single meal at home, packing his lunch in Tupperware. He's even giving up his precious weekends just to scrape together an extra 50 or 100 bucks. And honestly, the hardest part is that he stays at home, just staring at his banking app while he watches his friends go out to nice dinners, lease brand new cars, and post all those tropical vacation photos. He is literally muscle-tearing his way through his 20s just to build up his savings.
And then, after months of this absolute monk-like discipline, a loan logs into his account, and there it is, exactly $10,000. He takes a deep breath. He fully expects this massive wave of relief, right? He expects to finally feel rich. But instead, as he's staring at the screen, this weird, hollow feeling washes over him. It's an incredibly anticlimactic reveal. Because suddenly, it hits him. This 10 grand, it can't buy him a house. It absolutely does not mean he can quit his job. It doesn't even generate enough passive income to cover a cheap dinner out at the end of the month. If he leaves it in a standard bank account, he's going to make what? Maybe 10 or 20 bucks in interest for the entire year? And that brings us to this incredibly raw quote. Alone thinks to himself, what was the point? I sacrificed a whole year of my life, and all I got was a number that changes absolutely nothing about my daily reality. You can feel the frustration there, right? The research shows that this is the exact moment where the vast majority of people just throw in the towel. And it makes total sense why. People look at the sheer agonizing effort it took to save that first 10 grand. They compare it to the microscopic financial return they're getting, and they just assume the game is completely rigged. They figure, hey, if it's this incredibly hard just to hit 10,000, getting to 100,000 is literally impossible. So why not just blow the cash today and actually enjoy life?
Which brings us to part 2, the physics of money, breaking the gravity of survival mode.
The source material argues that a loan is actually looking at the wrong ledger entirely. We need to stop using words of burden and instead look at the actual physics of what just happened. See, when you have literally $0, 100% of your financial growth relies entirely on raw physical labor. You are trading your actual time, your sweat, your sleep, your sanity, just to grind out a few bucks. Your money is completely dead. It's like trying to push a massive 5-ton boulder up a really steep hill. When it's sitting at the absolute bottom, it takes an agonizing amount of physical effort just to nudge it a single inch. You're pushing, you're sweating, your legs are trembling, and you've moved it maybe 2 feet. It feels utterly helpless.
When you're flatlining at zero, your money has absolutely no gravity. It all depends on you. But reaching that $10,000 mark, that's the equivalent of getting that 5-ton boulder moving just enough that it finally starts to gain a tiny bit of its own momentum. For the first time in your life, you aren't operating in the negatives. You have successfully broken the heavy, crushing gravity of survival mode. Part 3, escaping the scarcity tunnel, the shift in the nervous system. Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is
the profound, quiet wave of psychological safety that takes over your body right at this stage. Psychologists call this breaking out of scarcity tunnel vision. It's this wild state where your brain physically loses the capacity to think about the long term, forcing your focus entirely on immediate survival. Think about it.
When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you literally, mathematically cannot care about compounding interest or index funds or where you'll be for retirement 20 years from now. Why? Because you're actively stressing about how you're going to pay rent in 12 days. And ironically, that immense stress causes people to make short-term impulsive decisions that keep them trapped right where they are.
Just think about the difference here. In survival mode, a strange clicking noise in your car makes your stomach completely drop. A cracked phone screen is a full-blown crisis that drags you straight into high-interest credit card debt. But in strategic mode, which kicks in the very moment you cross that 10K threshold, that exact same clicking noise is just an annoying chore. A $500 repair? You just pay it instantly in cash. Your life doesn't derail. You now possess the absolute rarest commodity in the modern financial world, and that is breathing room. And breathing room, my friends, is exactly where wealth begins to compound.
Moving on to Part 4, Rewiring Your Identity. Destroying the subconscious scripts.
You know, the hardest part of building wealth really isn't the mechanics of investing. It's actually changing the deeply ingrained narrative about who you are. Most of us grow up believing these really toxic subconscious scripts about money. Things like, I'm just not good with money, or people like me never get ahead, or wealth is only for lucky people. So what happens? Every time someone with those scripts gets a little extra cash, their subconscious mind literally panics. Having capital completely contradicts their internal identity, so they subconsciously sabotage themselves. They go buy a newer car, they upgrade their wardrobe, they buy a round of incredibly expensive drinks for all their friends, all just to quickly drop back down to their comfort zone of having nothing.
But when you hit that five-figure sum, you experience what psychology calls self-efficacy. Basically, it's the rock-solid belief in your own ability to succeed, proven to your brain because you successfully controlled your impulses and executed a long-term plan. That 10 grand permanently shatters those toxic scripts. You can't lie to yourself and say you're bad with money anymore, because the cold, hard proof is staring right back at you. You've officially shifted your identity to someone who accumulates capital, and suddenly your behavior changes automatically. You start looking at every single dollar as a tiny invisible worker whose only job is to go out and bring more money back to you, rather than just paper you trade for some fleeting consumer item. And this brilliantly illustrates how the rules of society completely invert for you. When you have $0, the system extracts. You get slammed with overdraft fees, you're forced into high-interest auto loans, and you have to buy small, expensive groceries because you just can't afford to buy in bulk. It is mathematically incredibly expensive to be poor. But the second you cross that $10,000 threshold, the system actually starts to reward you. Suddenly, banks are offering you high-yield savings accounts just to leave your cash sitting there. You can lower your insurance premiums by taking a higher deductible simply because you actually have the cash to cover it. You completely transition from being a victim of the financial machine to a rewarded participant. It's a total game changer.
Part 5, The Momentum of Wealth. From agonizing grind to predictable routine.
Okay, let's take a collective breath here, because the math and the behavioral automation of this next phase are incredibly optimistic. In phase 1, reaching that first 10K required raw, brutal willpower. It was literally like trying to fill in an Olympic swimming pool with a tiny plastic spoon. But phase 2, reaching the next 10K, it is entirely different. Why? Because to save that first 10 grand, you had to learn exactly how to live on less than you earned. You built the systems, you dialed in the budget, and you forged that mental toughness. And those habits, they don't just disappear. They become completely second nature. Saving money stops being an agonizing daily sacrifice and simply becomes your default lifestyle. And by phase 3, your existing capital is working quietly in the background, compounding and adding its own returns. The boulder is finally rolling downhill. Which leads us to this really profound truth about wealth accumulation. The journey from $0 to $10,000 is a test of character, but the journey from $10,000 to $100,000 is simply a matter of routine. I really want to emphasize this to reassure you. The hardest part of the entire process, the highest, steepest wall you will ever face, is already behind you. The rest of the mountain is just a steady, predictable walk. Wealthy individuals don't have superhuman willpower. They just crossed this initial threshold a long time ago and let the laws of financial physics take over. So if you are currently sitting at zero, or you're right in the middle of that grueling grind trying to scrape together those first few $1,000s, I need you to remember this. The number in your bank account is a lagging indicator. The leading indicator is your discipline. Every single time you say no to an impulse purchase, every time you pack your lunch or choose long-term freedom over short-term status, you are building permanent psychological armor. You are outright refusing to remain trapped in the survival cycle, even if your bank account hasn't quite caught up to your mindset yet.
The light bulb is not broken. The charge is simply building up in the wire.
Keep pushing that boulder, keep flipping that switch, because once you finally cross that invisible line, your entire financial universe changes forever, and the door to true freedom just swings wide open. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. The charge is building in the wire. Are you ready to keep flipping the switch? If you want to keep mastering the hidden psychology of money and avoid the traps that keep people broke, make sure you join us for the next explainer. We're going to continue building your financial freedom together. See you next time.